Hello folks, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for your continued support, your subscriptions, and of course your questions and your comments. Do please keep them all coming. Now, believe it or not, we are almost halfway through this 2021 Formula One season. Just 2 races remain until the summer break, and the first one of those was not just one of the most historic and important races of the Formula One season, but it's one of the biggest events of the British and global sporting calendar. It is, of course, the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, made all the more important this year, not least because we are in the midst of an incredible championship battle between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, but also because the race weekend will feature for the first time a sprint qualifying session on Saturday afternoon in place of the normal qualifying. We're going to explain exactly how that's going to work and look towards the race by previewing the British Grand Prix. Now, before we get started, I want to thank my friends at Morning Brew for sponsoring today's show. Morning Brew, not just that all-important first mug of coffee in the morning, but your one-stop shop for the very latest from the worlds of finance, business, tech, and beyond. Now, I'm not sure about you, but my mornings usually consist of trawling through social media apps, looking at endless photos of people far better looking than me who all seem to be on holiday, or a constant stream of motorsport news and opinions, so much so I increasingly find myself out of the loop of what's happening in the real world. Morning Brew gives me everything I need for the day in an easy-to-read, witty, but informative 5-minute hit. Without it, in just this last week, I wouldn't have learned that college athletes can now monetize their image, that a 12-year-old kid became a chess grandmaster and will now likely monetize his image, and that TikTok's videos can now be 3 minutes in length. Because clearly, longer videos of dad dancing is what we all need in our lives. Anyway, if you would like a daily digestible update on the worlds of business, finance, tech, sport, and a whole heap beyond, there's really no excuse not to sign up to Morning Brew. It's incredibly simple and incredibly fast. Just hit the link in the description below this video, and in less than 15 seconds, Morning Brew will become a part of your daily routine. Right then, to business and to the British Grand Prix, where we arrive with Max Verstappen 32 points in the lead of the Drivers' Championship standings. He has won 5 Grand Prix this year. Red Bull Racing have won 5 races on the bounce, and that is the longest period of time that Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes have gone without a win in recent memory. It's been quite the astonishing start to the season. It ebbed and flowed in the early races between Mercedes and Red Bull, but Red Bull have stepped up over the recent races to really take control of both the drivers and the constructors' standings. You may remember at the start of the year, some pundits after pre-season testing in Bahrain were predicting it would be Red Bull's year. Even Mercedes said that they entered the year on the back foot. Pwah! Rubbish, everybody said. That's all talk from Mercedes. But it proved to be so. Mercedes had struggled through the testing period with a really sketchy rear end on their car, and it appeared that in order to overcome that, they've had to put such a big rear wing on their car that it's affecting them on the circuits which were usually their home, those big power circuits. According to F1.com, in Austria at the last Grand Prix, Mercedes were the slowest through the speed traps. That's something that I can't remember seeing. The tide is turning. The balance is shifting in the favour of Red Bull and of Max Verstappen. And that's particularly important when we look at Silverstone, usually a race which has suited Mercedes over the years. In fact, Lewis Hamilton's won every British Grand Prix bar one since 2014. But he didn't win the 70th anniversary race at Silverstone last year. Don't forget, we had 2 Grand Prix at Silverstone. That honour went to Max Verstappen. Max will be hoping to repeat that this year. Silverstone is a fast circuit. It is a power circuit, but it has those flowing sections where you need a little bit of downforce on the car in order to keep it planted to the track. Red Bull seems to have the perfect package right now. Mercedes really are playing catch up. And crucially, they have some updates in the pipeline for the Grand Prix. But Lewis Hamilton said after Austria he doesn't believe that those upgrades to his car will be enough to see him enter his home race as the favourite. That title still goes to Max Verstappen. Either way, it's going to be an incredibly exciting weekend, as we've seen race by race, weekend by weekend. The battle between Mercedes and Red Bull, between Max and Lewis, is strong. What role, though, will their teammates be able to play? Sergio Perez has a win under his belt already this year for Red Bull Racing. Valtteri Bottas, though, at Mercedes, with a lot of pressure on his shoulders as he attempts to prove to the team that he is worthy of retaining his seat into next season. Can't wait to see how it all plays out at the front. But of course, there are other teams and other drivers who have shown themselves to be incredibly fast this season, not least just down the road from Silverstone. It's quite a long way down the road, actually. It's just out of Motorsport Valley, down the motorway, down into Surrey, at Woking and at McLaren, who are having a resurgent 2021. Well, what can we say about McLaren other than that they are having one of their best seasons in a very, very long time? With Lando Norris, they look assured and they look rapid. They've been adding updates to their car throughout the year, which saw them take the front row of the grid in Austria at the last Grand Prix. Now, that owed a lot to Lando's finesse behind the wheel, but that car and that team together are getting themselves back to a place of serious competition. Will they be as fast at Silverstone? Well, a lot of that depends on the upgrades that Mercedes have made and the competitiveness between themselves and Red Bull Racing. They may not be, McLaren, as fast as they were in Austria, but they will be there or thereabouts. The one thing they do need to get on top of, though, is the car for their second driver, Daniel Ricciardo. We know he's quality. We know he's a race winner, one of the most highly regarded drivers in the sport. But he's struggling, particularly on low fuel, to get the confidence in the car, to be able to draw the most out of it in qualifying, which means he's starting on the back foot for the race itself. The team has faith in him. Daniel has faith that he'll be able to pick it up. And just as when he moved from Red Bull to Renault and struggled in those early races, it appears the same is true at McLaren. When he finds his feet, though, he will be incredibly strong. He trails his teammate by over 60 points in the championship standings at the moment, and that is a huge amount and one that is unlikely to be overcome by season's end. Lando Norris is the only driver this season to have scored points in every single race and has taken a podium at 1/3 of the Grand Prix held this year. Can he make it on the podium at Silverstone at his home race? It would have to defy the odds for him to be able to do so, but if there's one thing Lando's been very good at this year, it's defying the odds. McLaren, though, are stuck in the midst of a brilliant battle with their old enemy Ferrari. 19 points splits the two teams as we head to Silverstone, and that just shows that a great weekend for one and a poor weekend for the other could see the tables completely flip and maneuver the teams around in the championship order. Mattia Binotto, the boss over at Ferrari, has said they've made very little, if any, updates to their car throughout this year. It's just been a matter of understanding the car that they've had at their disposal. And with that in mind, Austria was hugely important for them because at the start of the year they had a car that qualified well but didn't race well. Then after a really difficult weekend in France, they had to go in and study what was going on with the car. And they came out realizing that the changes they put in place in Austria meant they weren't going to be as strong in qualifying, but they would be stronger in the race. And so it proved, with great strategy and brilliant driving from, in particular, Carlos Sainz, seeing them net a couple of great results. 5th place for Carlos, a wonderful result in the Austrian Grand Prix. They came home 6th and 7th in the Styrian Grand Prix the week before, so the promise is there. The one question mark, though, is over the glorious British weather. It is the height of British summertime, which means it's likely to be cold and it's likely to rain, such as British summertime. And those were the conditions in France in which Ferrari really, really struggled. They'll be hoping that it's warm. But if British summer is British summer and it's cool and damp, it may hold all of the steps forward that Ferrari have made back and put them into that terrible space they were in France. Now, if one team can claim Silverstone to be its home race, it's Aston Martin, based as they are in the old Jordan factory, which sits at the roundabout at the very entrance to the Silverstone circuit. There is no Formula One team closer to the Grand Prix than that team. And they've had a fairly decent start to the year. Of course, a podium already for Sebastian Vettel in Baku, and Aston Martin with an awful lot of marketing behind them and still an awful lot to prove. It's not as competitive a season as they were hoping for, as they find themselves embroiled in a battle with a couple of other teams, beginning with Alfa Tauri and Alpine. Alfa Tauri have had a disappointing start to the season. At times, they look like they had the third, at least the fourth fastest car, but they've never been able to maximise it. A combination of contact on track, strategic errors or driver errors, ultimately leaving them with fewer points on the board than they would have hoped for and that they felt they believed. For Alpine, meanwhile, it's been a fairly strange start to the year. They didn't, on paper, have a top 10 car, a points finishing car at the start of the season, but they've been grinding out the results. At the start of the year for Esteban Ocon, more recently for Fernando Alonso, returning to the sport and really getting to grips with his team and with his car. But as Fernando's come on song, Esteban's been left scratching his head to the point that he wants the team to give him a new chassis because he doesn't understand why his laps are feeling good, the car's feeling good, but the lap time simply isn't there. It's going to be a really fun scrap between these three teams at Silverstone to see who can make up those final points-paying positions, because with Ferrari and McLaren locked in battle, with Red Bull and Mercedes in battle up at the front for the World Championship, it's really sort of that P8, P9, P10 positions that will be fought over between these teams. And then you've got the others. You've got Alfa Romeo, you've got Haas, and you've got Williams. Alfa Romeo have only scored 2 points this season, but they have a car which does come alive in the races for both of their drivers. But what both of their drivers have got to get sorted is their qualifying performances, because their racecraft, their race day pace has looked brilliant and their strategy has been on song all the way through the year. If they just started a little higher, who knows how many points they could have scored already this year. For the Haas F1 team, a really, really difficult Formula One season, and it doesn't look like it will get any easier for them at Silverstone. 2 rookies on board, learning their craft, a car that hasn't really been worked on all that much since last year into this year, and definitely through this year. Their focus is on 2022. This year is all then about learning, about experience for their drivers, who are pretty much having to scrap between themselves. And last, but by no means least, Williams. Of course, one of the most storied, famous and successful teams in Formula One history, which has had a difficult time of things of late. But the pieces of the puzzle are all starting to be put back together. The car is becoming more competitive, and particularly at the hands of George Russell, on occasion, is looking wonderful, as it did in Austria, into the top 10 in qualifying and in the race on merit, fighting the likes of the Alpines and the Aston Martins and the Alfa Tauris and the Alfa Romeos, cars that by rights and over the last couple of years you wouldn't have assumed or thought it could or it should be racing, and yet George has been. But while Austria looked great, Silverstone could be a little bit more difficult. It's a big, wide open track on an old RAF airfield. It's up high and the wind absolutely whips across the place. And the wind is the one thing that Williams really doesn't like. It makes the car incredibly unstable. The British weather, the wind, all of the conditions combining together could make Silverstone a very, very difficult weekend for Williams after undoubtedly one of its most promising weekends to date at the Austrian Grand Prix. But of course, all of the teams and all of the drivers are stepping into the unknown at Silverstone for a number of reasons. First, sprint qualifying is coming to Formula One, and it is coming to Silverstone. How is it going to work? Let me explain. Friday morning will start exactly as Fridays always do, with free practice 1, which will last for 1 hour. Then, in the space of free practice 2, we roll straight into qualifying. Qualifying will be exactly as qualifying would normally be on a Saturday. 3 sessions over the space of 1 hour, 5 drivers knocked out in first qualifying, 5 drivers knocked out in second qualifying, the top 10 shootout in that third part of qualifying, and that is to set the grid, but not for the Grand Prix. Saturday morning, we have free practice 2, 1 hour. Then Saturday afternoon, we have our sprint qualifying race. The grid for that has been set by the qualifying session on Friday evening. And the finishing positions of that sprint qualifying race will determine the grid for Sunday. The sprint qualifying race will be 100 kilometres, which will last about 30 minutes. Now let's say Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen front row of the grid from qualifying. In that sprint race, let's say they get to turn 1, they take each other out and they're out of the race and eliminated on the spot. They will start Sunday's Grand Prix from 20th and 19th places. Your finishing positions in your sprint qualifying race determine your grid start for the Grand Prix on Sunday. It's the first time it's been tried. It's going to be trialled at a couple of races this year. I can't wait to see how that pans out. The other step into the unknown, or one of the other steps into the unknown, is because Pirelli are bringing new tyres to Silverstone, more robust construction. Now, they were trialled at the Austrian round, the drivers and teams approved, and so they will be brought in for the British Grand Prix and for the remainder of the season. Will those tyres create a big reset button for the World Championship, or will it just take a little bit of finessing from all of the teams? Which ones will it suit? Which ones will it hold back? Again, that is a step into the unknown. And of course, and as always, with it being the British Grand Prix, the greatest step into the unknown of all, the British weather. Yes, we're in the midst of the British summertime, but while the morning can be sunny, the afternoon and the evening can be torrential rain. It is just that way with the British weather, and as I stand here and I record this, it's grey and it's dreary outside, and about 40 minutes ago it was bucketing down with rain. No doubt it'll be sunny in a few minutes' time. Welcome to England and the height of summer. Well then folks, that's just about all we've got time for. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for watching. And my thanks, of course, to my friends at Morning Brew for sponsoring today's video. Enjoy the British Grand Prix. It promises to be an absolutely wonderful event. But for now, thanks for tuning in and we'll see you next time.